So, how I got into cannonballing with a GMC pickup truck is a really unique one because, like a lot of people, I started out as just a fan. Enjoyed watching the videos, knew about the Cannonball movie, kind of knew the story, learned more about it on the VINwiki channel. And like a lot of people, I really saw that the fast times that people like Doug and Arnie were putting up were just completely out there, right? But knew it was something kind of out of reach for someone like me until I saw David Simpson's video about the Old Spanish Trail run that he did, and he had done it solo. And I think I made the mistake that a lot of people that watch Cannonball content, they'll see the average speeds and it doesn't seem like it's that fast, but you kind of start to go down that path. And I would read the comments on a lot of these videos, and there was always people saying somebody should do it in a pickup truck with a giant gas tank in the back. And I had a pickup truck in the garage. And so my daily driver was a 2014 GMC Sierra that's a little bit unique in its configuration. It's a Z60 high performance package. And of course, when I bought the truck, I didn't know what it meant, but I had to look it up. And if you're familiar with GM trucks, it's the opposite of a Z71 off road package. The truck's factory lowered 2 inches and it's got a really stiff front end. So the truck drives like a car. And my family and I made a bunch of road trips in it. I knew it was a pretty comfortable and competent road trip pickup truck. And so I'm reading these comments that somebody should put a giant fuel tank in the back and see what they could do. And so my journey really became about bar talk with your buddies that gets out of control. I started asking questions and started going to some friends and seeing what they thought about it. And the first question that you really ask is, how much gas do you need to go nonstop? Because that's in theory what makes the truck even remotely, respectable in a cannonball. And so I'd kind of done some cocktail napkin math and figured out it was about 200 gallons that the truck would need. The next question becomes, well, can the truck carry that much weight? So I go to this farm community, down the road from where I was living. I buy one of those IBC totes, big plastic box that they keep fluids in, and I put 200 gallons of water in the truck. And the truck, it was within payload, but I start to drive it around and it's sloshing and the truck's unmanageable. And I think I slid through a stop sign at some point trying to stop it, but I knew that the truck could carry the weight. And then actually did the math on the gasoline. And the gasoline is about, for 200 gallons, is about 1,386 pounds. So the first question gets answered. It's within payload of the truck. Now you've got to solve some other problems about going after David's time for the Old Spanish Trail solo record. So now it's, can the truck survive? Like, this is not a high performance vehicle, no matter what the GM badge says on the side of it. I started asking some questions. Got a good friend of mine named Steve Peterson, who's a GM master technician. At the time, now he's got his own shop and he would service the truck. So I go in one day and I ask him, I said, Steve, can this truck run for, let's call it 40 hours at over 2,500 RPM to 3,000 RPM, maxed out speed for 40 hours at full payload? And Steve, who's a very straightforward, common sense guy, says, yeah. I said, no, I don't think you understand. Like, we're talking about there's this cannonball thing, and can the truck run as hard as it possibly can for this long at full payload? And he goes, absolutely. GM engineered it to do that. He goes, you're not asking it to do something that the engineers at GM, didn't expect it to do. So I keep going on further and further, waiting for somebody to tell me, no, this is not going to work. Next thing I know, I'm at this welding shop because I knew if I'm going to put 200 gallons of gasoline in the back of the truck, you don't do that yourself. You find professionals that can take care of it. And on my way back and forth to work, there's this welding shop, and I knew that they did tank work. So I stopped in after work one day and said, hey, I got a question for you. Can you build a baffled gasoline fuel cell that will fit in the back of this truck, T-shaped, as much weight forward of the axle as possible? And I kind of laid it out and I said, look, I'm just going to take some long trips with it. And the guy looks at me and says, yeah. And I said, well, no, like, can you make sure like it's pressure tested? It's not going to leak. It's not, I'm going to have sloshing issues. Can we kind of subdivide this tank? And he goes, yeah, we can do that. So again, somebody else doesn't tell me no. I get those guys to start to put together this custom built fuel cell for the back of the truck. And we had to figure out, now a whole nother list of problems. Like any cannonball car, how do you make it survive? Because it doesn't matter how fast you can go if your car doesn't survive. So we now start to work diligently on preparing the truck. We start to go through the engine, look for any failure points there. Basically, anything that was a wear item was changed on the truck. She gets brand new Michelin tires, go through brakes, rotors, anything to make sure that the truck is prepared as possible to do this. And the brakes and rotors were really important because as much weight as it's carrying, you got to be able to stop this thing. So we put a lot of time and effort into it. And we started to do weight testing on the bed of the truck with the weight. And I noticed that it only sagged about an inch in the back. So it really wasn't too bad. But we went ahead and we put Firestone Ride Right airbags on the back of the truck because I'd seen the movie The Mule with Clint Eastwood. And this guy's driving around a pickup truck all over the country doing crazy stuff. And I didn't want to be going in the middle of the night with the truck tilted up, where somebody would know there's a cover over the back and the headlights are pointed up. Didn't want to get into that scenario. So we put the airbags on the back with a control where we can adjust the ride height for the truck. So we kind of start working through all these issues. And then next thing I know, the truck's coming together. Then I reached out to David. And so David Simpson was incredibly gracious with his time. I basically sent him a Facebook message, didn't know him at all, asked if I could have an hour of his time to talk about this. And he was so cool about it, gave me a bunch of time, answered all of my questions, and was incredibly supportive. Like he'd kind of vetted, asked me about the build and what I was doing. And of course, everybody's eyebrow goes up when you say, I'm going to run it nonstop in a pickup truck. Get through that conversation with David. He begins to introduce me to people within different groups, introduces me to Doug and Arnie, a couple of other folks, because he said, somebody's going to have to validate your time. And remember, this is the guy whose record I'm trying to take. Start to talk it through. I keep David updated. Next thing I know, I'm backed up to a sand dune in Jacksonville, Florida, with 220 gallons of gasoline in the back of the truck because even though it was built for 200, I found out it would hold 220. Now, at this point, I don't know if I need a DOT number on the side of this thing or hazmat placards, but I'm completely loaded. The truck's sitting there ready. And what's cool about the Old Spanish Trail route is it goes from Jacksonville, Florida, all the way to San Diego. And it's a true beach to beach run. So I'm backed up to this sand dune and I take off. And I've got these folks from the community watching, they're validating the time. I'm going on. And that run was not without problems. Like a lot of folks in the community had ventilation problems with the tank. So I actually had to stop about 4 or 5 times to throw gas in the truck. However, though, it worked out. So I was fortunate enough I exceeded David's time by about 30 to 40 minutes. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'm, holding the solo time for the Old Spanish Trail route, which was incredible. I never thought this pickup truck would be able to do anything like that. I never thought that I would be able to do anything like that. So incredibly happy about it. Within the chatter starts. Well, what are you going to do next with the truck? And so got to meet more and more people in the Cannonball community. And I got invited to the Southern Classic, which is the Smokey and the Bandit themed event where you run from Atlanta, Georgia, pick up a six pack of Coors beer and Texarkana and come back. As that event was kind of evolving, it was moving to more of a period, correct? But there were still some what they called outlaw classes, people that could run what you brung kind of deal. And I showed up one year just to meet people, have a good time, and run the route. The truck performed incredibly well in that event too. I was actually able to set the solo time for that course, which I still hold at 15 hours even. So that was a great event because now the truck was participating in around much faster cars. At one point during the event, we're all kind of chattering back and forth, and I'm trying to run down, one of the fellow participants who's in a much, faster vehicle than I'm in. And I get this message that says, "You're not going to catch us." And I had the thought of mine to respond back, "You need gas." And so there was this great moment where I'm trying to reel somebody in, and then you see the dot go off the map and they've got to fill up, and the truck with the fuel cell just keeps chugging along. And then ultimately the question comes up, when are you going to run New York to LA? And so I really became interested in it because I knew that in the Old Spanish Trail route, the truck didn't run nonstop. And that's was supposed to be what it was built to do. Taking off 30 to 45 minutes of fuel stops would give the truck a respectable time. So you start to prep for New York to LA. And I started to look at some of the spreadsheet times and what was out there. And I wasn't necessarily going for a time, but I knew what the time was for nonstop. And again, I really wanted the truck to perform. But one of my heroes of Cannonball is Dennis Mad Dog Mancini. And he is memorialized with the GMC dually that's shown in the movie. Dennis actually ran a Chevy dually in the 79 event. It received the Friends of OPEC award. I think he was carrying 160 to 170 gallons in this truck. And so he's been my hero. I wanted to be able to say, well, this was the fastest truck in Cannonball. So I set off to New York. I'm in Manhattan, got a group of people that are following again. My goal is really to run nonstop and see what I can do with the truck time. Take off in the truck, and it's interesting, kind of like what Ed says, doesn't matter how prepared you are, you're going to pull the handle on the slot machine of fate and you're going to get what you get. The run starts, I'm leaving Manhattan, I'm coming past the Empire State Building, and the Lincoln Tunnel shuts down for a crash. So I have to reroute a little bit, go through the South Tunnel in Manhattan. That cost me a little bit of time. Take off, get a pretty good head of steam built up. And then as I get to St. Louis, I get to the west side of St. Louis, the traffic stops and it starts to slow down. They're hanging a power line across the interstate at 6 o'clock in the morning. So that starts to slow me down a little bit. And then as I'm going across Arizona, there's a red flag warning and there's a 50-mile-an-hour wind coming out of the west. Now, what I'm driving is an aerodynamic brick on a good day. Now it's got a 50-mile-an-hour headwind, and it is just screaming across Arizona, trying to maintain any speed while turning these high RPMs. And that really slowed the truck down a little bit. But I get to the Portofino, and so it's another solo run. The truck performed nonstop, put my seatbelt on in Manhattan, took it off at the Portofino, and the truck is just a mess by the time it gets to the Portofino. I get there at about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and the security guy comes walking out and says, hey, can I help you? And I essentially stumble out of the truck. I can barely stand. The truck's filthy. There's half of a tumbleweed shoved in the grill of the truck. It just looks like a complete mess. And I was able to set a time that was 35 hours and 3 minutes, which at the time had set the new nonstop record. It was 11 minutes short of Dennis's truck record. And I was so heartbroken over it. And, and honestly, because you're by yourself, I really wasn't paying too much attention to the time. I was just trying to get there. When I found out it was 11 minutes, it was just so, deflating. But everybody was so supportive. The truck had done what it was built to do, performed great. And so ever since then, I spend time looking at the truck and chasing 11 minutes.
This month, we've got our 2 best deals ever back from Glossit. We've got their DIY ceramic coating kit, which is a $210 value, including their graphene ceramic coating, plus a bottle of their ceramic detail spray, which makes the application so easy an idiot like me can do it in my own garage. That's a $210 value for just $69.99. Or, if free is the better price, you can get a bottle of their award-winning detail spray for free. Just pay the shipping and handling. We've had to limit that, so I don't know how many are left, but check the links in the description below and find out which you can get. Either way, you're going to get some great Glossit goodness.